He ran Ontario's Niagara chapter with a grip no one dared test. But that's not why ex-Hells Angels still glance over their shoulders when they mention Craig "Truck" McIlquham. Try asking them who shot him in a crowded parking lot. Better yet, ask why no one saw them leave. By day, he dropped his kids at school and made dad jokes at the cottage. By night, he moved millions through gambling rings and whispered with mafia kings. His name was never in headlines, but his phone was in every room that mattered. A man who didn't need to shout because silence followed him. A Windsor-born enforcer who became a national power broker. A father who held secrets tighter than blood. Some called him a ghost. Others, the devil in plain clothes. But in Niagara's underworld, they just called him Truck, and they knew better than to ask questions. It was a Tuesday evening like any other in Burlington. Quiet, uneventful, safe. The Mandarin restaurant on Fairview Street bustled with the usual dinner crowd. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of sweet and sour chicken, sizzling garlic beef, and the soft clatter of buffet plates. Families lingered at tables, sipping tea and cracking fortune cookies. Craig McIlquham had just finished dinner with his wife and children. It was one of their rituals: comfort food, low stress, no reservations.
This past April 29, 2025, at 8:30 p.m. on a Tuesday night, Craig McIlquham was exiting the Mandarin Chinese buffet at 1881 Fairview Street in the Burlington area of Ontario. Supposedly, he'd been dining at the establishment earlier with family members.
As they stepped into the parking lot just after 8:20 p.m., there was no sense of danger. Craig walked ahead, relaxed, keys already in hand, heading back toward his black SUV parked near the darker, quieter corner of the lot. His family followed behind, chatting about leftovers and school plans. The night air was cool, the mood routine. But someone had been waiting. A figure had been watching from the periphery, still hooded and positioned with purpose. He had arrived minutes earlier, slipping through the edge of the lot unnoticed. He didn't fidget. He didn't pace. He simply waited. As Craig rounded the front of his vehicle, the man moved. Security footage, though grainy and incomplete, captured the approach. The shooter closed in from the blind side, quick, controlled, but never rushed. He didn't yell. He didn't hesitate. He stepped in close and fired a single shot directly into Craig's chest. The sound was muted, almost forgettable, a small crack in the night air, easily dismissed by those still inside finishing their dessert. Craig collapsed immediately. He crumpled to the pavement between the SUV and a nearby sedan, falling sideways in one motion. Within seconds, chaos spread across the lot. Cries for help, people calling 911, a nurse sprinting from the restaurant with her hands already shaking. But the shooter was gone. Witnesses saw a gray Honda Civic exit the lot seconds later, slow and deliberate, slipping into traffic like it had nothing to hide. Its windows were tinted. Its plates are unreadable. It has never been recovered.
The police investigating the shooting believe this newer model gray Honda Civic was possibly involved in the incident. The Hamilton Regional Police are appealing to the public for any information, including dashcam footage of Fairview Street, and help in identifying that Honda Civic.
Craig was pronounced dead at Joseph Brant Hospital later that evening. One bullet, no suspects, no arrests, and a city that suddenly didn't feel so safe anymore. To understand why a man like Craig was executed in front of his family in total silence, we have to go back. Because this wasn't just a murder. It was a decision. Hey brothers, tired of YouTube's BS and censorship? It's time to break free. That's why I've shifted gears to Patreon, where I can bring you the raw, uncensored content you crave. Join my Patreon crew and get an insane package deal. Exclusive early access to all videos, days before YouTube, 100% ad-free viewing experience, uncensored, no-holds-barred community discussions, double the content, 2 killer videos every single week, VIP access, direct interaction with yours truly, inside scoop, exclusive biker world updates you won't find anywhere else. Ready to join the elite? Hit that Patreon link now. Your support doesn't just keep us rolling, it fuels a revolution of uncensored, unrestricted content. Join now and unlock a world of exclusive benefits. Long before bullets echoed through that parking lot, Craig McIlquham had already disappeared. Not physically, but into a life where being visible was dangerous and being known was fatal. He wasn't like the others. He didn't crave attention. He didn't flex inked sleeves or roar his bike down Main Street. His power came from staying quiet, staying sharp, and staying out of sight. They called him Truck because once he started moving, there was no stopping him. He was slow, deliberate, and crushing. The name stuck. So did his presence.
He's from Oakville, part of the Halton region in the Toronto suburbs, but for the last, better half of the last decade, he has been the #1 shot caller in the Niagara Hells Angels.
If Ontario's outlaw underworld was a chessboard, Craig was the hand moving the pieces behind the curtain. He didn't just wear the patch, he enforced its meaning. Loyalty, secrecy, control. And if you slipped, if you crossed him, you wouldn't hear the consequence coming. He'd started in Windsor, working security for Walter Stadnick, the godfather of Canada's biker nation.
Truck McIlquham came up through the ranks of the Hells Angels as Walter Nurgat Stadnick's bodyguard and driver, head of his security, before taking power in the Niagara chapter.
From there, Craig absorbed the rules of the elite. In time, he wasn't just protecting power, he was power. But what made Craig dangerous wasn't what he did, it was what he knew. He sat in the rooms where alliances were formed, where turf wars were mapped out, where street-level violence met boardroom-level strategy. He never asked questions, but he heard answers no one else was supposed to. And unlike the flashier presidents, the ones with gold chains and bar fights, Craig didn't leave trails.
He's a guy that's known to have a big heart. He's not known to be a ruthless motorcycle club boss, more in the mold of his mentor Nurgat, as somebody that is more stealth than a sociopath. And McIlquham is a guy that, by working with Nurgat, had connections all over Ontario, Quebec, Manitoba, Alberta.
By the time he took over Niagara, the chapter had teeth. His name drew respect in Hamilton, fear in Toronto, and silence everywhere else. Rival clubs didn't test Niagara's borders. Even organized crime families knew where the lines were and who was drawing them.
McIlquham has a reputation of being very well liked, very respected, a guy that, although very intimidating in his, the way that he presents, that's how he got the nickname Truck.
But here's the thing about shadows. They hide power. They also hide danger. Because the deeper Craig went into that quiet control, the more he became a vault of secrets, the kind people would kill to protect or to bury. And while no one saw it at the time, something had started cracking beneath the surface. Craig wasn't invincible, and the double life he built was about to turn on him. To the outside world, Craig McIlquham appeared unremarkable. A middle-aged man with a dependable truck, 3 kids, and a fondness for quiet weekends at the family cottage.
And father of 3, he loves spending time at the family cottage and cracking corny dad jokes. And that's what we usually forget when we cover stories like this. These are human beings. These are fathers. These are brothers. They're human beings that have families. We always forget that because everybody's worried about what club they were in. This is, quote, above all, Craig's greatest pride and purpose in life came from being a father, a husband, a son, and a brother. His family meant everything to him, and he made sure they felt that love every single day.
Neighbors remembered the way he waved while taking out the bins, or the care he showed while shoveling snow from his elderly neighbor's walkway. There was no flash to him, no ego on display. And that was exactly the point. Because Craig had built 2 lives, and he kept them from touching. At home, he was Craig Brown. On paper, he was self-employed. In practice, he was present, never missed a birthday, paid for braces, never let the gas tank hit empty in his wife's car. His kids knew him as the calm one. His wife described him as protective but kind. He made his world feel safe. But beneath that suburban stillness, Craig operated in shadows. He was still truck, still commanding quiet respect in the outlaw hierarchy, but he did it without headlines or street fights. While others in the scene fed off chaos, Craig managed tension. He met with men in industrial parks, not bars. He used old phones, never left paper trails, and spoke only when needed. Everything he did, every handshake, every favor, was about control. He was so good at it, even law enforcement couldn't find cracks. For over a decade, he kept both worlds spinning in parallel, a husband in daylight, a fixer by nightfall, until the balance broke. In 2019, Project Hobart landed like a wrecking ball. Ontario police had built a massive case.
Project Hobart began in January of 2018 as the result of an escalation of violence across Ontario and Quebec, which included attempted murders, arsons, threats of extortion, shootings, and assaults.
Craig wasn't just mentioned, he was named, charged, tied to a sprawling network of wire transfers, cash collections, and offshore accounts.
Back in 2019, when he was indicted in Project Hobart, the ultimately doomed Project Hobart case files, in that, law enforcement documents, prosecutorial allegations linked both McIlquham and current Montreal Hells Angel power Teflon Rob Barletta to the Figliomini crew within the Sederno group.
During the investigation, 5 sophisticated illegal gambling websites controlled by the Barletta, McIlquham, and Retta were identified.
The headlines ran with it. His name was printed next to mobsters and bikers across timelines of late-night meetings and gambling dens. He didn't panic, but the illusion cracked. His movements were watched, associates were questioned, and his family asked more questions than he could answer. And inside the club, people started whispering. He hadn't flipped not yet, but the risk was now undeniable, because a man under federal investigation was a man under pressure. And a pressured man, no matter how loyal, was a liability. The charges were dropped in 2022 on a technicality. Too many delays, and Craig, he walked free.
The case against McIlquham and 29 others was eventually dropped in 2022 due to its exceeding the 30-month limit under Canadian law, where presumptive time limits are set for criminal trials.
But in his world, justice delayed wasn't justice forgotten. And those who survived this long knew freedom often came with a price. After the charges were dropped, Craig returned to routine, or at least he tried to. Same gym, same coffee run, same Mandarin restaurant with the family on Tuesday nights. But nothing was truly the same, not anymore. Those 3 years under legal scrutiny had changed the temperature around him. Conversations grew shorter. Old friends stopped returning calls, and within the club, where silence was tradition and loyalty sacred, something cold had begun to set in. Freedom didn't absolve him, it complicated him. Because, while the public saw a man who'd escaped a flawed court process, those in Craig's world saw something different. Someone who had been too close to the flame and somehow hadn't burned, and that made people nervous. Project Hobart hadn't been a minor inconvenience. It was a $40 million investigation that tore through biker circles, loan operations, and mafia-linked networks across Ontario. Lives were upended. Fortunes were seized. The Crown dropped the charges, but the street didn't forget the spotlight. Craig's name had been in reports. His phone had been tapped. His connections to Rob Barletta, to figures in the Figliomini crime family, and to the movement of offshore money had all been documented.
Part of that investigation showed that, and we're talking about how many major iconic Hells Angels that Truck McIlquham was directly connected to. Part of the 2019 bust, we saw that he was meeting pretty frequently with Sam Cazetta and Sky Langlois, the guys that run the South Mother chapter for the Hells Angels, and that Cazetta was helping Barletta, and McIlquham, according to the indictment in 19, moved somewhere between $5 and $10 million from a stash house that they had, and how they were going to get that cash over to the bank accounts in the Caribbean.
For the men who'd lost everything, his silence didn't reassure them. It haunted them. What had Craig said? What had he withheld? And most dangerously, what could he still say? That question may have been the fulcrum on which his fate turned. Not whether he had flipped, but whether he could. In the criminal underworld, perception often outweighs fact. And the perception around Craig had shifted. He had become too visible, too informed, too unpredictable. There were whispers that debts had gone unpaid, that someone in his orbit had promised things they couldn't deliver, that fingers were being pointed, some quietly, some in dark corners of back rooms. But not all danger came from outside. Inside the club, there were protocols, old ones. When a member's stability threatened the patch, the fix didn't come through mediation. It came through erasure. Some believed Craig had refused to step down when asked. Others said he was distancing himself, not enough to quit, but enough to worry those above him. Some claimed he had simply grown too calm, too confident, for a man who should have been scared. And then there were the enemies outside the patch. In the Calabrian syndicate, in old rackets gone bad, in families who'd lost men to indictments while Craig walked free. A man with Craig's knowledge, Craig's reach, and Craig's silence could only do one of two things. He could disappear quietly, or be made to. On April 29, 2025, someone chose the second option. The headlines disappeared quickly. One day, Craig McIlquham's name was on every front page in Ontario. By the next week, it was gone, pushed aside by a mayoral scandal, a celebrity overdose, and the next rotation of tragedy. But in the underworld, his murder didn't fade. It just sank deeper. No arrests were made. No witness stepped forward. Halton Regional Police issued a call for tips, circulated the blurry image of a gray Honda Civic, and confirmed that the killing was targeted. But beyond that, nothing. The shooter vanished the same way he arrived, deliberately and without a sound.
Halton police haven't made any arrests. Of course they haven't. Investigators released a photograph of a vehicle in interest. That's right there. It's a gray one.
Craig's funeral came and went under light security and heavy eyes. There were no full-patch riders flanking the casket, no roaring engines in tribute. Just a few quiet faces, family close, lips tighter than ever. Even among his own, no one risked saying too much. Because in Craig's world, the less you spoke after a man's death, the longer you lived. The club offered no comment. Neither did the families he worked with. Even former associates who no longer wore the patch wouldn't entertain the conversation. Craig had crossed too many borders between groups, between lives, between loyalty and liability. And the truth was, no one really wanted to know who did it.
At Original Gangsters Podcast and our companion web magazine, The Gangster Report, we're reporting that the Calabrian Mafia, the Ndrangheta, the Sederno group are being looked at as the top suspects in this murder, and that the motive had to do with joint rackets that were being run or are being run between the Sederno group and the Hells Angels, and related to bookmaking and narcotics and allegations of monies that were owed and not paid or came up missing, or people that were being edged out of certain deals. And people, what we're told, the crux of the investigation right now is that Truck McIlquham had developed enemies within this group of the Ndrangheta in Toronto that he was doing business with, and they targeted him and murdered him last month.
In this world, answers are earned in blood, and Craig's had already been spilled. His family grieved quietly. They didn't speak to the media, and no one blamed them. They had watched the killing unfold. They had heard the shot. They had seen him collapse. Not just a father or a husband, but a man who had walked a fine line for too long. Craig died as he lived, without noise, without spectacle, and with far more story than anyone was willing to tell. And so the case faded, unsolved, unspoken, unclosed. But the message stayed. Because when a man like Craig is executed in front of his family in a suburban parking lot and no one is held accountable, it doesn't mean the system failed. It means the code is held.